Orrin was 71 and knew the sounds of a house the way a dealer knows the click of chips. So when he rolled his wheeled bag over the tile on a dry Tuesday afternoon in Las Vegas and heard low bass coming from the back bedroom, he stopped at once and listened with his head slightly turned, the way he used to when a player tried to slide a chip after the call. It wasn't Mara's usual music at all, not the soft standards she liked for folding laundry, but a slow, pulsing track with a beat built for someone to move to on purpose, and the hairs on his arms lifted in the conditioned air that smelled faintly of lemon polish and the spicy sauce bleeding through the paper bag of Korean barbecue he had brought home as a surprise. He set the food on the kitchen counter without noise, turned the wall clock in his mind, 3:11 p.m., and let his breathing drop to the steady count he had used for decades on casino floors. Then walked down the hallway with the quiet step that had served him well when he needed to see a table from a new angle. The bedroom door was not fully shut, but left open by a careful hand, a narrow slice of light cutting the darker hall and showing a moving arc across the carpet. And he let one eye find the gap, not greedy, just enough to see what was true. There she was, Mara, 56, the woman he had painted this room with 10 years ago. Moving without clothes in front of the tall mirror they had bought on sale at the outlet, her hair pinned up high and then falling as she turned. Hips slow, arms lifted, her gaze fixed on the man sitting on the edge of their bed. Dante, the personal trainer who had started coming around after Mara's knee scope last winter, a man younger by a decade and proud of it. Wearing the smug look Orrin remembered from tourists who thought luck made a system. A half glass of something on the nightstand, catching the light in a way that told Orrin there was no accident here. His chest tightened, but his hands stayed steady, because hands are what people notice. And he raised his phone, framed once to catch both faces and the corner of the old dresser, so the place was clear. Framed twice to catch the bedside clock that said 3:12. Framed a third time a hair wider to include the lamp and the curve of the headboard his brother had carved, then let the phone fall to his side as Mara turned and saw him in the crack and froze hard before pasting on a bright little laugh that landed too high. "It was a prank," she said, with a voice that sounded like a coin rolling toward the edge of the table, and Dante shifted, not standing, not sure. His eyes cutting to Orrin with the flicker of a man who suddenly understands house rules. And Orrin looked at both of them as if they were two cards face up, and he said only one word in a calm tone that felt like a stamp. "Understood." And then he stepped back from the door, walking away in a straight line, not touching the walls, not bumping a thing, turning left into the kitchen where the lemon smell lived. And the clock on the microwave turned to 3:13. While the bass from the bedroom kept a slow count that already meant something else. He took a glass from the cabinet, filled it with water from the filter, drank the whole thing and rinsed the glass and turned it upside down on the drying mat, because actions mattered now and every action would be clean. And he set the phone on the counter and looked at the 3 images for exactly 5 seconds each to make sure they were clear, then locked the screen and slid the phone into his pocket. From down the hall, he heard a quick flurry, a whisper, a scuff, a bathroom door, the sticky pull of a drawer. And he crossed the kitchen, picked up his car keys, and left by the front door without letting it slam, sun bright on the driveway, the heat hugging the stucco as if it were trying to remember it. In the garage, he sat in his old Buick with the engine off and placed both hands on the wheel and let them shake for 1 full minute while he counted his breaths. 1, 2, 3 to 5. And when the minute was done, he pressed his palms flat and made a small note in the pocket notebook he kept for oil change dates and grocery totals. 2's 3:13. Bedroom, music, mirror, glass, bedside clock. 3:12. Response understood. And he underlined the hour once. He had learned long ago that memory is a kind of gambler too, and likes to rewrite hands after the fact, so he would not trust memory alone. He would build a record. And as the old house cooled behind him, he sat very still and let his mind move in steps the way a good detective does. What is known, what is unknown, what is likely, what is proof. And he felt the sharp hurt in his chest, like a hot chip pressed into skin. But he kept it parked and made room for the work. He turned the key, backed out slow, and drove to the end of the block, stopping before the corner to watch the front of his own home in the side mirror. And at 3:19, the younger man came out with his shirt wrong and his shoes in his hand, head down, looking at the ground, as if the ground could offer him advice. And then he put the shoes on by the mailbox and kept going to a gray hatchback that Orrin had seen twice on this street in the last month. And Orrin noted the dent on the rear bumper and the dealer plate frame from a lot on Desert Inn, and the little air freshener that swung when the door shut. And he wrote 3 brief words: Dante Car Gray. And then he waited. At 3:24, Mara stepped onto the porch in a robe, scanned up and down the street with a face that tried to be calm and failed, went back in, came out again, took a breath that lifted her shoulders, then went in for the last time and closed the door. And Orrin wrote, M. Alone 3:24, because time matters. And later someone would ask him what time, and he would not say about, he would say 3:24. He drove then, not fast, to a strip mall with a coffee shop that had quiet tables and free Wi-Fi and no one who knew his name, parked under a narrow strip of shade. And before he even went in, he pulled out his phone and opened the gallery and made a duplicate of the 3 photographs and sent the copies to an old email address he kept for receipts. An address only he knew. And then he placed the phone in airplane mode because files like to travel, and he wanted his to sit still. He leaned back and let his eyes close for 5 slow breaths, felt the heat through the windshield and the small ache behind his left shoulder where the years lived, and told himself out loud in a steady whisper what he would do and in what order. Secure evidence, verify dates, list charges, make no scene, invite witnesses when ready. And hearing the plan in his own voice made it more real. He went inside for a black coffee he did not taste and sat in the corner facing the door, the way he always had when he worked nights and liked to see who came and went. And he opened his notebook and wrote the date across the top of a fresh page and drew a line down the center, facts on the left, questions on the right. And under facts he wrote Maros Dante, bedroom, 3:12 to 3:13, music track slow, glass on table, mirror smudged edge left. And under questions, he wrote, how long? Where else? Who paid? Why door left ajar? And then he put the pen down and let the pain roll through and out like a hot gust from the valley, so it would not surprise him later. He was not going to shout and he was not going to beg, because shouting is for show and begging is for hope. And he was finished with both. He was going to count, record, and act. And before the coffee cooled, he knew what the first scene of this new life would look like. A quiet old man in a clean shirt, writing in a small book, marking the time of a betrayal as if it were a split pear on a busy night. Because that is how you start a case when the case is your own. By seeing, by naming, by putting one card at a time in the proper place until the hand shows itself without noise. Orrin sat in the back corner of the coffee shop with his black coffee cooling by his elbow and worked like a quiet detective, starting with what he could reach without leaving the table. The cloud account he had set up years ago so family photos and bills would sync to the home iPad. He signed in on his phone, found the message backup, and with a slow thumb scrolled through Mara's thread with D. A contact saved under a fake last name that meant nothing until you noticed every conversation started after 10 at night and ended with the same emoji. He took screenshots of anything that proved time and place. Gym selfies, stamped with Tuesday dates, a photo of the hotel lobby carpet on Sahara he recognized from a charity auction, a careless shot where the edge of their bedroom lamp snuck into the frame. And he sent each image to a private email address he used only for receipts and tax notes, an address no one knew. He then opened the bank app, not guessing, but checking, and there they were. Small transfers every other Friday to a digital bank with a friendly name, withdrawals made near a strip of apartments off Desert Inn, and a hotel charge recorded the same afternoon he had been told by Mara that she needed a stretch class across town. And he wrote each line in his notebook with the same slow care he had used to tally chip stacks on closing shifts. Date, vendor, amount, note. He did not let anger lead his pen. He let the numbers lead it, because numbers have no motive. When the list reached the bottom of the page, he took a breath, started a new page, and made a timeline that tied the messages to the money. A map of lies that did not need fancy words to make its point. By 4:30, he had enough for a first folder. So he stepped outside into the hot Nevada light, called a number his bowling buddy Gerald had given him for a no-drama attorney. And when a calm voice answered, "Tran Law," he gave his name, said he needed to speak in person about a domestic matter with financial parts, and listened to the answer that came without judgment. "Bring what you have. Don't confront. Document first." He said thank you, booked a morning slot, and hung up, then called 6 people who had known him and Mara for years. 2 from church who hated gossip but loved truth. His HOA neighbor who knew how property rules worked. Mara's bridge partner who believed in facts. An old casino friend who had seen 100 marriages blow up over greed. And his niece who worked HR and understood paperwork. And to each he used the same plain script in a steady voice. "Small get-together at our place Saturday at 7. Want you there, just friends and finger food." And when each asked what the occasion was, he said the same thing. A little show and tell, which was not a lie. After the last yes, he drove 2 blocks to an electronics store and bought 3 thumb-sized cameras and a compact projector with an HDMI cable, kept the receipt, and went home with the bag under his arm like a man carrying spare fuses. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the air conditioner, and he moved from room to room with the deliberate calm of a night guard, placing the cameras where they would see but not be seen. One behind the row of hardcovers in the living room, tilted through a gap between 2 spines. One high on the dining room hutch inside a porcelain bowl with a thumb hole that made a perfect lens port, and one in the foyer tucked into the mouth of a wooden duck. Mara thought was charming. Then he paired each device to his phone, checked the timestamps, spoke the date out loud so audio would catch it, and watched 10 seconds of live feed to make sure the angles held. He tested the projector on the blank wall above the sideboard and saw his phone screen bloom there, and in that moment he felt like a stagehand more than a husband, which was fine, because a clean reveal needed a steady crew. At the kitchen island, he built a neat stack of folders with tabs, messages, bank, hotels, timeline, and slid into the front sleeve 3 still photos from the bedroom that showed faces and a bedside clock, but nothing else. Evidence, not cruelty. Each image stamped with the minute and the date. He sent 1 copy of the full packet to a secure cloud drive and printed another set on the old laser printer that had never failed him. Then taped a manila envelope shut and wrote Miss Tran's name on it in block letters. When Mara came home at dusk with a grocery bag and a bright voice, he was rinsing lettuce and smiling like a man who liked ordinary life. And when she mentioned they should maybe invite people over on Saturday, "It's been a while, it would be nice," he said could work. And she did not hear the way his tone clicked into place like a card in a shoe. After dinner, he washed the dishes with slow strokes and let her talk about a new class, a new diet, a new plan, the words gliding over him like light wind over desert rock, and he added only small nods and soft sounds so the evening stayed smooth. When she went to shower, he set the new keypad code to activate Saturday at 10 p.m., printed a small sheet that said "Welcome" in big letters to tape on the door for their friends, and texted his neighbor, "Swing by at 6:55 with that HOA flyer, please." A code for "Be a witness at the door." Later, in the spare room, he laid his suit jacket on a chair, pressed the wrinkles out with his palm, and slipped the remote for the projector into the inside pocket so he would not have to search for it. At the moment, the room went quiet. He did one more thing, a careful man does when motive might challenge method. He wrote a short note and placed it in his fireproof box with the property deed and his will. A note that said, "Recording made in my own home for private evidentiary purposes. Shown to a small group of trusted friends to prevent rumor and misstatement." Not because he expected trouble, but because trouble often arrives when pride is wounded. At 11, he walked the perimeter of the house, checked the locks, and stood in the doorway to the bedroom he had shared with Mara, looking at the lamp, the mirror, the bed with its smooth spread. And he felt the hit in his chest again, and let it pass like a slow truck on Tropicana. Then he turned off the light and closed the door. The next morning, he drove to Miss Tran's office with the envelope handed it to the receptionist, and sat in a chair that squeaked while he waited. When the lawyer called him in, he laid the folders on her desk and spoke in a steady chain from the moment of the music to the photos to the money to the names of the friends who would come. And she listened with the attentive face of someone used to storms, then said, "We'll file emergency financial orders Monday and prepare a packet for service. If you plan a reveal, keep it brief and decent. No shouting, no threats, only facts." And he nodded because that was already his plan. By noon, he had a signed letter for the bank to freeze joint lines above a certain limit, a checklist for changing codes, and a promise that a process server could be on his street Saturday at 8 if needed. He went home, called a caterer from the next neighborhood. "Finger foods for 10, no mess, deliver at 6:30 Saturday." And spent the afternoon staging the dining room like a small theater. Chairs aligned so every guest would see the wall clearly. Name cards handwritten so people would sit where sight lines made sense. Napkins folded, a small bowl of mints placed by the door because he believed in small courtesies even on hard nights. When the sun set, he watered the potted aloe by the window, sent a single group text, "See you Saturday 7, come hungry," and sat on the patio with a glass of water and the strip lights far off like a crown he no longer needed. And he told himself one more time, out loud and slow, the order of play for Saturday: greet, seat, show exhibit 1, show exhibit 2, call the server, change the code, say goodnight. It sounded almost like a prayer, and he felt its weight loosen something inside him. Because now the case had a plan. The plan had steps, and steps carry a man across a hard floor without stumbling. Friday began with small, careful tasks, the kind that look ordinary but carry weight when a man is building a case. And Orrin moved through them one by one, writing times beside each in his pocket notebook, so later nothing would blur. At 7:10 a.m., he checked the 3 tiny cameras again from his phone, watching the foyer, the living room books, and the dining hutch feeds for 10 seconds each to confirm focus and clock drift. None. Then he spoke the date aloud so the audio would mark it. At 7:25, he opened his laptop and arranged the files into a clean structure that any stranger could understand. A master folder called Saturday. Inside it, subfolders named Exhibit 1, Video, Exhibit 2, Bank, Exhibit 3, Messages, Exhibit 4, Timeline, plus a text file that listed Chain of Custody, Orrin only, with the dates he had copied, edited, and exported each item. At 8, he phoned Miss Tran's office to confirm the process server's window. Between 8:15 and 8:30 Saturday evening, and wrote that down. At 8:15, he walked the outside of the house, testing each window latch and noting the screen that needed a new tab. Not because anyone would break in, but because he refused loose ends. At 9:05, he drove to the bank and handed the teller the signed letter Miss Tran had drafted to lower transaction limits and require dual approval for transfers, and he listened without expression while the teller said, "Takes effect at midnight," and he wrote, "Limits 12 a.m. At 9:40, he called the caterer to confirm finger foods, no dips, small plates, delivery 6:30 p.m., and asked for decaf along with regular because some of their guests watched their pressure. At 10:10, he stopped at a stationery store and bought a narrow black binder and a pack of self-stick tabs. Then drove home with the Vegas sun bright on the windshield and his hands loose on the wheel like on any other day. Because calm hands build trust if the night's allowed later. At 10:40, he stood at the dining table and assembled his paper set. The first page a cover sheet with the word facts centered. The next, a single still from the bedroom with the bedside clock clear. Then the hotel receipts sorted by date. Then the bank withdrawals mapped against stretch classes. Then the text snippets where times and places matched charges. And at the back, the timeline, a straight line from the first gym selfie to Tuesday at 3:12 p.m. Everything labeled in large, neat printing. At 11:20, he called his neighbor, the HOA board man, to confirm the small duty, knock at 6:55, and stand by the door if anyone tried to leave mid-show. The neighbor said, "I'll have the flyer," and Orrin said, "Thank you," and wrote, "Door witness okay." By noon, Mara was in the kitchen acting as if the week had not cracked open. She asked about chicken or beef, and Orrin said, "Caterer has it." And she laughed like this was a party for fun. not a ledger. At 12:20, her phone lit up and slid face down as it always did, and when she walked to the laundry room, the screen woke with Dante on it, then dimmed. Oren did not touch the phone. He wrote D-call 1221 and returned to his binder. At 1, he ate a sandwich and made 2 envelopes. One stamped for Miss Tran with a fresh copy of the exhibits on a USB drive, one blank to hand to the process server with house details. At 1:30, he drove to a locksmith he trusted but did not need, not for service, just for reassurance. The man behind the counter explained the keypad schedule once more, showed him how to print a log of code changes, and Oren nodded, then bought a spare battery pack for the keypad in case Saturday night turned strange and power failed. At 2:20, he returned and rehearsed the sequence for Saturday out loud in the empty dining room. Greet, seat, pie joke to set people at ease. Exhibit 1 for 10 seconds only. Pause on the face and clock frame, say the time. Exhibit 2 slides for dates and amounts, then speak the 3 sentences he had written the night before. This is my home. Those are the facts. Please be witnesses to the truth. He practiced the sentences twice more until they sounded like him and not a script. At 3, he called his niece, asked her to bring a clipboard and a calm look, just in case anyone later says they weren't there, and she said she would make a simple sign-in sheet with arrival times. At 3:30, he tested the projector again and adjusted the lamp on the sideboard so glare would not wash the image. At 4, he printed small name cards and placed them at the table in a pattern that gave each guest a clean sightline. His church couple together, the bridge partner near the end where the sound was best, his niece near the wall outlet so she could plug in if needed, and an empty chair opposite the screen for Mara. At 4:25, he placed the tiny speaker under the table edge with tape so it wouldn't rattle and tested volume at 4, audible but not harsh. At 4:40, he took 10 quiet minutes to sit, eyes closed, like he used to before a long shift, slowing his breathing to a count of 5 in and 5 out until the tightness in his chest softened. At 5, Mara called from the bathroom, "What time again?" And he said, 7 sharp, and when she asked who was coming, he listed first names only, the way you would for a card night. At 5:10, he stepped onto the patio and called the process server's number. Miss Tran had given, confirmed the color of his front door, the porch light bulb wattage, the small brass turtle doorstop, details a stranger would recognize fast even in evening shadow. And the server said, "Got it, I'll text when I'm around the corner." And Oren wrote, "Server text." At 5:30, he made room in the fridge for the delivered platters and pulled the wedding china to the back of the cabinet so he would not see it. He used plain white plates instead. At 5:55, he checked each camera a final time and saw only the quiet rooms waiting. At 6, his phone buzzed with his niece's message. "On my way. Proud of you." He put the phone down and stood in the center of the living room to see it as a guest would. Entry, chairs, table, blank wall, nothing extra. No family photos on display to pull attention toward the past. Just now in proof. At 6:10, Mara came out dressed too brightly and said, "Music?" And he said, "Let's keep it soft," and turned on a low jazz station that made a good floor for conversation. At 6:20, the caterer arrived, rolled in 2 trays, and left a printed list of contents. Oren tipped him and asked him to exit through the side gate so the front stayed clear. At 6:30, he set glasses, filled water pitchers, and placed napkins in 2 tidy stacks. At 6:35, he clipped the small remote inside his jacket pocket and slipped the binder into the drawer by his seat. At 6:45, he walked to the door and checked the hinge squeak. None. And cracked it an inch to feel the evening air. The sky over Henderson was turning that pale blue that folds into orange. And the neighborhood was quiet in the way it sometimes is before something important. At 6:50, his neighbor texted, "Walkin' over," and then knocked with the promised HOA flyer in hand. And Oren opened, greeted him, and said, "You'll sit over there, by the entry. If anyone tries to leave mid-sentence, just hold the handle and look at me. Nothing more." And the neighbor nodded like a man taking a simple job seriously. At 6:53, his niece arrived with the clipboard and a soft smile, set the sign-in sheet on a small side table by the door, wrote her name and the time 6:53 p.m. and placed a pen beside it. At 6:55, the rest of the friends began to appear in pairs. The church couple with a store-bought pie, the bridge partner with flowers, the old casino friend with an awkward hug. Oren shook each hand, said, "Thank you for coming," and guided them to their seats. He did not explain yet. He kept his voice level and his eyes the same as always. At 6:58, he saw Mara glance at the door with a nervous smile, and he knew she expected one more guest, the younger man with the gym voice, and Oren wrote one last line in his notebook as he closed it and put it away. All set, witnesses present, clock true. And at 7 on his wall clock, with the room full and the table quiet, he took his chair at the head, tapped his fork once to the glass for attention, and said, "Thank you for being here. We'll start now." And the detective work that had begun with a low beat in a back bedroom came to its proper moment, the part where facts step into a lit space and stand still so everyone can see. At 7 o'clock sharp, with the last chair filled and the room steady, Oren tapped his fork to the rim of his water glass and let the soft chime settle everyone. He spoke in a calm voice that carried to the corners, the same way he had once called table limits on a loud casino floor. And he gave them the shape of the night in plain words. "Thank you for coming. I invited our friends to watch the show, so there will be no rumors later. This will be brief. I will show 2 exhibits, then we are done." He looked from face to face, his church couple, the bridge partner with folded hands, his old casino friend, his niece with her clipboard, the HOA neighbor by the door. And when the room gave him that small silence that means people are ready, he pressed the remote and sent the first file to the blank wall. The video came up fast and clean, a quiet frame from Tuesday afternoon, and in it the lamp and the headboard that everyone knew set the place without Oren having to say the word bedroom. The clip ran for 10 seconds, exactly, no more. A woman moving without clothes, a younger man on the bed edge, the bedside clock in the corner reading 3:12. And then it paused on a still image with both faces clear and the clock numbers plain. There was a small gasping sound from the bridge partner and a sharp breath from the church wife. But no one spoke. Oren kept his tone even. Exhibit 1. Recorded Tuesday, 3:12 p.m., my house. Faces are shown, bodies are not. This is enough to confirm identity and place. There is audio with one word, understood, which I said when I was seen. He pressed the remote again and the image cleared to a title card that said Exhibit 2 in big block letters, and then to a dated list of hotel charges, withdrawals, and transfers, the numbers large enough to read from the back. He did not point with his hand. He used simple sentences that worked like arrows. February 18th, hotel charge, Sahara area, same weekend as stretch class. March 5th, transfer to new digital bank, memo, wellness. April 26th, cash withdrawal near Desert Inn apartment row, 1 hour after message labeled session ran long. These are not guesses. These are matches by time and place between messages and money. He clicked twice more, and the screen showed a tight timeline, left to right, from the first late-night message to the Tuesday he came home early. He let the line sit so eyes could follow dates and see the pattern. Then he clicked again to a final slide marked Facts. When the screen went white, Dante pushed the door open without knocking and stepped in on a short grin that faltered when he saw the room and the wall. The neighbor moved one step and set a casual hand on the handle so the door stayed closed. Nothing forceful, just present. Dante tried to set his shoulders and said, "What is this?" in a voice that aimed for light and missed. Oren did not raise his voice or look away. "This is my home. These are the facts. You will sit until I finish, then you may leave." Dante looked to Mara for help. Mara stood at her chair with her hands twisted in the napkin she had folded and refolded 3 times and said the same line she had used on Tuesday, but smaller, like she wanted it to be true this time. "It was a prank. We were going to tell you. It was nothing." Oren gave the same reply because facts do not need new words. Understood. Then he said to the room, "For the record, Mara is my wife. Dante is her trainer. The affairs shown in Exhibits 1 and 2 have run 8 months by the timeline. The purchases and withdrawals match that period. I have provided copies to my attorney. Tonight you are here as witnesses, so there is no confusion later about what was shown or said." He sat, and in the beat before anyone spoke, he heard the buzz of a text on his phone. He checked the screen once and read the process server's message. Around corner. He put the phone face down, stood again, and said, "We are almost done. A server will arrive shortly with papers. After service, a new door code will take effect at 10 p.m. The bank limits change at midnight. No one needs to argue here. We will follow the orders." The church husband cleared his throat and asked the only question that mattered for witnesses. "Are these copies we can sign beside?" And Orrin nodded at his niece, who rose, moved the clipboard to the side table, and said, "Please print your name and the time you saw Exhibit 1 and Exhibit 2. There is a short line for any comments if you wish." The room moved the way rooms do when decent people realize they are part of a hard duty. Pens scratched. The bridge partner signed with a small, tight signature and set the pen down like it was delicate. The HOA neighbor kept his post by the door, but leaned over long enough to write his name. And 7:12 p.m. Dante shifted in place and said, "Louder now. You can't record people like that. This is illegal." Orrin had the answer ready, not because he liked the push and pull, but because a good record needs a clean reply. "This was recorded in my home. It is being shown privately to trusted friends for evidentiary purposes. If you think there is a legal issue, your lawyer can contact mine. Please do not shout." He did not explain chain of custody or Nevada law. He did not add heat. He kept his hands by his sides and his voice even. Mara's face went pale under her makeup, and she reached for the back of her chair. She tried one more tack, soft and pleading. "Orrin, we can go to counseling. We can fix this. Just turn it off." Orrin shook his head once. "We are not in the guessing stage. We are in the recording stage. There will be counseling if a judge orders it. There will be division of property. There will be a schedule. Tonight there are facts and service." The doorbell rang at 7:18, and the neighbor opened it 2 inches, checked, and looked to Orrin. Orrin nodded. The process server stepped in with a polite "evening" and 2 envelopes. He asked for Mara by full name, handed her the packet with temporary financial orders and notice of separation, and then asked for Dante by full name and handed him a no trespass notice for the property. The server asked no questions and left with the same neutral face he came with. The room stayed quiet, except for a small sound from the bridge partner, a sound like air leaving a paper bag. Orrin closed the projector file and the wall went blank again. He slid the remote into his jacket, opened the dining room drawer, and placed it there with a small click. He looked at each friend and said, "The show is over. Thank you for being my witnesses. There is pie in the kitchen if you wish to stay 5 minutes. No one is required to speak or decide anything tonight. Your presence is enough." The church couple stood and each put a hand on his shoulder for a half second, then went to the kitchen. His niece squeezed his arm and said, "Proud of you," and stepped aside to let others pass. The HOA neighbor stayed until the last signature was on the sheet and then gave a short nod and left, leaving the brass turtle doorstop in place. Dante hovered by the hallway, looked as if he might speak, and then did not. He went out into the evening without slamming the door. Mara did not move. She looked at Orrin with a kind of shocked hurt that arrives when a person expects drama and gets documentation instead. "You planned all of this," she said, and he answered, "I prepared all of this," because the difference mattered. He did not raise his voice. He did not rehearse blame. He only set the shape of the next hours. "You may stay until 9 to collect what you need for 2 weeks. After 10, the code changes. If you require anything else, contact counsel. There will be no yelling in this house." The facts had been shown, the witnesses had signed, the papers had been served, and the man who once watched cards for a living had watched faces and times and numbers with the same patience. And now, as pie plates clicked in the kitchen and the low jazz filled the space where the video had been, he stood with steady hands and felt the strange, clean relief a detective feels at the end of a long day when the report is written and the case moves from seeing to filing. The house emptied the way a theater empties after a serious play, and when the last guest's footsteps faded down the walk, Orrin stood a moment in the doorway with his hand on the brass turtle and listened to the new quiet, a clean quiet without secrets, then shut the door and turned back to the room where the blank wall still held the soft afterglow of the projector. He breathed once through his nose, counted to 5, and moved into the next part of the plan, as if he were closing a table at the end of a shift. Small tasks first, then the heavy ones. He slid the remote into the drawer, locked it, and put the key in his pocket. Then lifted the clipboard where his niece had gathered the signatures and read each name and time out loud in a low voice so the foyer camera would catch the chain of witnesses. Evelyn, 708. Pastor Lee, 709. Frank, 711. Nina, 712. HOA Ken, 712. Elena, 713. Before he tucked the sheet into a plastic sleeve and set it on top of the binder, he texted Miss Tran a short message. Exhibits shown, service complete, witnesses signed, proceeding to code change at 22 Howard, and placed the phone face down on the sideboard so it would not pull his eyes if someone tried one last appeal. Mara stood by the sink with a napkin twisted between her fingers, the way a person works a confession they do not want to say. And when she finally spoke, it was in the soft tone she used when asking for a favor at a shop counter. "Oren, please, don't do the code. Let me stay tonight. We can talk in the morning." But he had already decided that nights were where lies lived. So he shook his head once and kept his voice even. "You have until 9 to gather 2 weeks of what you need. Medicine, toiletries. After 10, the code changes. If you need other items, counsel will make a schedule." And because detectives document, he crossed to the table, took his pocket notebook, wrote, "Mara asked to stay. Declined. 21 limit repeated, and underlined the hour. She stared at him as if he had stepped out of the body she knew and into a stranger's coat, then walked to the bedroom with a small flinch at the doorway, like the room itself had teeth. Oren did not follow. He went to the garage, pulled down 2 clean boxes, carried them to the hall, and set them where the light fell even, and the foyer camera could see them. At 8:01, his phone hummed with a text from a number he did not know and did not need to know. "You did me dirty, old man. You can't keep her." And he took a photo of the screen, forwarded it to Miss Tran with the line, "Message presumed Dante," and wrote 8:01 text, threat tone, then slid the phone back face down. He walked to the keypad, pressed the test button, saw the green flash, and opened the small battery drawer to confirm the new pack seated tight. In the kitchen, he covered the pie, rinsed the coffee cups, lined them upside down on the mat like white soldiers, and wiped the counter in slow, even arcs that returned the lemon smell to the room and leveled his breath. He could hear drawers in the bedroom, then the closeted sound of a suitcase zipper, then nothing. Then the small thud of someone sitting on the edge of a bed that no longer meant the same thing it had meant at noon. At 8:14, he phoned the non-emergency line and spoke to a clerk in a clear voice. "Oren Hale? Henderson address, no disturbance at present. Dating partner served no trespass order at 7:18. Requesting log note due to prior messages." And he spelled Dante's name slow, thanked the clerk, and wrote the incident number on his palm and then in the notebook because ink on skin fades fast. At 8:22, he opened the safe, placed the signed witness sheet next to the thumb drive labeled EXH1-4, closed the safe, spun the dial, then checked the living room camera feed to confirm the angle still held the entry and the hall. When he turned, he saw Mara standing with a small suitcase and a grocery bag, face washed of color, lips pressed flat as if stopping words might turn back time. "Keys," he said, not sharp, just steady. And she reached into her purse and set the ring on the sideboard with a slow clink that sounded louder than it was. He handed her a blank envelope and a sheet he had printed that afternoon. "Property list. Line what you take tonight. Copy for counsel." And she stared as if the paper itself was rude, then took the pen and wrote the way people do when each word is heavy. At 8:37, she said, "He said he loves me," as if that fact might reach under the ledger and flip it. And Oren nodded once and answered in the plain way detectives answer when a witness offers motive after proof. That is a separate question from what happened here, and returned to the counter to clean a spot he had already cleaned, because sometimes the body needs a task while the mind holds still. At 8:45, the porch light came on by timer, and the pool of warm yellow made the door look like a stage exit. Mara carried her bag to the mat, paused, turned back, opened her mouth, closed it, and said only, "I never thought you would be this cold." And he met her eyes so she would hear the words without looking away. "I'm not cold. I am careful now. Then opened the door and held it until she stepped into the glow and down to the walkway. He watched until the sidewalk had her shadow, and then shut the door without force, locked the deadbolt, and wrote, Mara departed 8:47 on the top line of a fresh page. At 8:50, he called his neighbor to say thank you and to pass the new code time. And the neighbor said, I'll sit on my porch a while. And Oren smiled into the phone because that was what good neighbors in quiet streets do when nights are delicate. He spent the next 9 minutes collecting objects that might argue with memory later. Mara's spare key from the bowl, the unsigned photo of them at Lake Mead that could tug his eyes towards softer thoughts, the framed menu from their first date. He wrapped them in brown paper and placed them in a box marked Hold until counsel. At 8:59, he stood at the keypad, watched the second hand on the kitchen clock slide toward the top, and entered the code that would switch the system to the new sequence at 21:59:59. The pad chirped, the small screen flashed, and the log printed a tiny strip of paper that he folded and tucked into his wallet with a steady hand. After that, he poured himself water, sat in the chair at the head of the table where he had begun the show, and let the weight of the night settle not as pain, but as order. The detective work of seeing and showing was done. Now came filing. At 9:10, he opened the binder and wrote a clean summary on a single page. Start 7. Exhibit 1 shown. Exhibit 2 shown. Service at 7:18. Witnesses signed. Threats received 8:01. Spouse departed 8:47. Code changed 9:59, and signed his name like a report. At 9:20, he walked the rooms the way he had the night before, not with suspicion, but with that slow, measured step that tells the floor you are still here. He turned off the dining light, left the foyer lamp on for 10 minutes so the camera would have a final even record of an empty entry, then clicked it dark. He took the pie from the counter, cut a thin slice, and ate it standing by the sink, tasting nothing but the honest quiet that follows truth. At 9:40, he sent one last text to Miss Tran. Summary sent by email. I will deliver originals tomorrow. And powered the phone down so the night would not ring. He made his bed in the spare room, set the notebook and a pen on the nightstand like a policeman sets his badge in a dish, lay down, and stared at the ceiling until the lines of the fan blurred and his breath matched the slow turn. Sometime after 10, he woke to the soft click of the scheduled lock routine taking hold, a sound like a book closing, and he smiled in the dark because that was, in the end, what he had wanted. Not revenge, not spectacle, but a clean, final page in a case file, and a house where the only noise at bedtime was the honest sound of a system that did exactly what he told it to do. Sunday morning began with delivery, not emotions. Oren rose at 6, brewed plain coffee, sealed the binder, the signed witness sheet, and the USB drive in a large envelope, and by 7:30 he was parked outside Miss Tran's office, watching the reflection of sunrise peel off the mirrored door. At 8 on the dot, the receptionist buzzed him in, and he laid the packet on the conference table like a dealer laying out a fresh shoe, then walked her through each tab. Video still, bank matches, hotel dates, timeline, signatures. While she checked off a list and said, we'll file temporary orders by noon. Expect a hearing date within 3 weeks. We'll also open discovery for financials and request a forensic review. And he wrote each step in his pocket notebook because steps beat feelings. By 9, he sat with the firm's forensic accountant, a quiet woman named Diaz, who printed color charts with patient hands and asked for 12 months of statements, card histories, reward point logs, even the rideshare receipts in case the pickup and drop-off times drew a map. He signed releases without drama, then asked for one extra thing he had learned to ask for at the casino when cash drifted. Check the credit reports. If there's a new line in both names, I want it frozen. And she nodded, tapped a note, and said, we'll place fraud alerts today. At 10, he walked 3 blocks to his bank, handed over the judge's stamped temporary order. Ms. Tran had already emailed, limit transfers, freeze joint advances, block new cards, waited and heard the soft printer clatter that confirmed the change. He kept the bank printout, folded it once, and slid it behind Exhibit Bank Actions in a thin black folder he had labeled that morning. He went home by the long way to avoid the habit of turning onto Dante's street, because habit invites trouble. And when he reached his driveway, the porch camera pinged. An unknown number had dropped a note. "You didn't need to do me like that. Call me." Unsigned, but easy to read. And he photographed it in place, picked it up with 2 fingers, sealed it in a snack bag, wrote the date and time across the top with a marker, and texted the image to Miss Tran with "received at 10:47, bagged." At 11, he made eggs and ate them standing up, then opened the small fireproof box and added a fresh page to his log. Son 10:47, note at door, bagged, counsel notified, no reply sent. Noon brought Diaz's first email, a rough trace of transfers that showed a pattern Oren had suspected but now saw in ink. Every other Friday, $600 to a digital bank labeled Wellness, 3 Venmo payments to an account tagged Coach DR, 2 cash advances near a strip mall gym, and a necklace purchase that had shipped to a parcel locker. Diaz also attached a screenshot from the Secretary of State's website. Ruiz Motion Coaching LLC, registered April 3, registered agent P.O. Box. And Oren printed that, circled the date, and wrote, "LLC formed mid-affair because Motive liked to pretend it was business." At 1, he called the non-emergency line again, gave the log number from last night, added the porch note, spelled the sender's likely name slowly, and asked politely that the record reflect the new contact. Then he did something small that steadied his hands. He took wide photos of each room for a property inventory. 2 angles per room, closet doors open, drawers closed. So later no one could claim a lamp appeared or disappeared by memory. By 2, he forwarded the images to Miss Tran and to himself at the old receipt email, then turned the phone face down, shut it off for 1 hour, and let the house breathe. At 3, he powered up, saw a new message from Diaz. Credit reports pulled. A joint store card opened 6 weeks ago. $1,900 balance, likely forged signature. And he exhaled through his nose, printed the report, and wrote across the top, "Dispute to file Monday." At 4, Miss Tran called with a timetable. Emergency financial orders filed and accepted. Hearing set 2 Fridays from now at 10 a.m. Temporary exclusive possession of the residence to Oren. No contact addendum in place to support the trespass warning. Discovery requests served on Mara's counsel for full financial disclosure. Oren wrote each point, read them back, and ended the call with "understood," the same word he had used at the doorway, because the word fit facts. The next days moved by sequence rather than mood. Monday morning, he met Diaz with a shoebox of statements, the old tax binder, and a small stack of receipts he had kept from a drawer, including a valet slip from a hotel he had never visited. At noon, he signed disputes for the store card and placed a 90-day fraud alert on his file. In the afternoon, Miss Tran's paralegal emailed a proposed stipulation from Mara's attorney, talk of misunderstandings and a request for spousal support. And Oren answered with a short list Miss Tran had helped write. Reimbursement for marital waste, no support until waste addressed, sale or buyout of the house within 90 days, and a neutral exchange method for personal property. He kept his sentences lean, because lean words carry better in court. That night he took a slow walk at Sunset Park, counted ducks and steps, then returned home to a quiet kitchen where he repaired a loose cabinet hinge, not as therapy, just as maintenance, because a hinge that swings true makes a room feel honest. Tuesday brought depositions. Oren sat in Miss Tran's small conference room while a court reporter adjusted a silver machine and Mara's lawyer tried to blur dates. Miss Tran's questions were clean. Is this you? Is this your message? Is this your bank? Do you recognize this necklace receipt? And when Mara's answers wandered toward feelings, Miss Tran pulled them back to yes or no, like a dealer pushing bets into their lines. Oren did not speak during Mara's time. He spoke during his Vaunfeis with the same plain tone he used to announce table min and max. And when they asked why he had invited friends, he said, so the facts would be witnessed and not argued later, and left it there. Wednesday, Diaz delivered a preliminary waste summary. $18,430 tied to the affair with dates and descriptions, plus the store card, plus a near-duplicate cash advance pattern that made her write probable business funding. And Oren signed the declaration that attached it. Thursday, he met a real estate agent named Rosa who had sold 3 homes on their street. She took quick photos, suggested a modest list price, and explained the form that would let him show the house to buyers while honoring the exclusive possession order. He said yes and scheduled preliminary cleaning for Saturday afternoon. Friday morning arrived bright and dry and found Orrin in a navy jacket that fit his shoulders like a familiar rule. In Department F, the judge took the bench at 10, glanced at the calendar, and called their case. Orrin stood beside Miss Tran, eyes on the rail, while she presented the binder in order and spoke crisp. Affair established, financial waste documented, exclusive possession in place, house disposition within 90 days recommended, interim support reserved due to waste. Mara's counsel argued strain and misunderstanding. The judge asked for dates and looked over her glasses when the dates did not match. When she spoke orders, she spoke like a metronome. Exclusive possession to Orrin confirmed. No contact addendum affirmed. Joint accounts limited to essential expenses with receipts. Diaz appointed as neutral to finalize the waste number. House to be listed within 60 days unless Mara bought out at an appraised value. Status review in 30 days. And no parties to disturb the other's peace. Orrin wrote the orders as the clerk typed them, because writing them made them real. After the hearing, he thanked Miss Tran, shook Diaz's hand, and drove home without turning on the radio. At the house, he made a simple sandwich, ate it, and began the next list. Change beneficiaries, update will, cancel duplicate streaming services Mara had opened, remove her from the club membership that billed quarterly, small, dull items that close gaps. That evening, the gym where Dante worked posted a bland statement about policy compliance, and a mutual friend texted Orrin a screenshot. He did not reply or gloat. He added it to the file labeled background and wrote irrelevant to orders under it so his own mind would not wander into revenge. When Sunday came again, he met Rosa for photos and signed the listing paperwork with a steady pen. He opened windows, let honest air move through the rooms, and walked each one with the inventory album to confirm what stayed and what went. By afternoon, the condo across town he liked had 2 units available, and he booked a viewing for Tuesday, not as escape, but as forward motion. That night, sitting at the same table where the wall had once held exhibits, he wrote a 1-page summary titled Week 1, Filings Made, Waste Traced, Orders Granted, House Listed, Credit Frozen, and signed it at the bottom. He folded the page and placed it on top of the binder, turned off the dining light, and stood in the quiet. A detective wraps a case in layers until it holds its shape, he thought, and then he smiled without showing teeth because this was not quite wrapped, but it was held, and held was enough for sleep. On Tuesday afternoon, 2 days after the listing went live, Orrin put on a clean short-sleeve shirt, folded the old Navy jacket over his arm in case the condo office liked formality, and drove to East Fremont to see the unit he had circled in the brochure. And he approached it the same way he had approached every step since the night of the show, like a detective closing a file, 1 page at a time. The building was 4 stories, stucco the color of toast, with a narrow courtyard where a metal fountain made a friendly hiss. And the manager, a woman with quick eyes and a key ring that chimed, led him to the elevator and up to a corner unit that faced west. Orrin walked the room slowly, counting under his breath the way he counted when he set limits at a table. Entry 1, living room 2, kitchen 3, bedroom 4, closet 5, balcony 6. He touched the counter edge to feel if it wobbled. It did not. Opened the cabinet under the sink, dry, no smell. Tapped the balcony rail with 2 knuckles, solid, and asked the questions that matter later. HOA fee, reserve fund, age mix, noise after 10, policy on overnight guests. The manager answered in simple sentences and did not try to sell him with adjectives, which he respected. He stepped onto the balcony and looked west, where the neon from downtown kept a quiet glow even by day, and he decided he liked that the city would be behind glass at night, not in his ear. At the desk, he filled out an application with his careful block print, paid the deposit with a cashier's check, and added 1 line to the notes box. Request grab bar in shower before move-in. Because hands that have worked cards for 40 years deserve a steady bar when soap makes tiles slick. On Wednesday, Rosa called with 2 showings for the house, which meant he needed to be out of the way. So he took his niece to lunch at a diner that still used paper placemats and ordered turkey on rye and told her a cleaned-up version of the week without the sharp points. And when she asked, "How are you really?" He answered the way he answered judges, "I am following the steps." And she nodded like that sounded like health. By Friday, Diaz sent the finalized waste total, $21,740, after adding the store card and the parcel locker jewelry, and attached a simple chart that matched dates to charges, and Miss Tran filed it with a short declaration. The judge signed an interim order that said those numbers would be reimbursed to Oren from the house proceeds before any split, and Oren read the order twice, set it in the binder, and did what he had begun to do when relief tried to puff up his chest. He breathed once and wrote, "Order entered, reim before split," in his small notebook, so his mind would hold the fact without adding music to it. The next week moved in a clean line. The condo approval came through Tuesday. He signed the lease Wednesday. Rosa texted that the second showing had turned into a strong offer Thursday. On Friday morning, Oren and Rosa sat at his dining table and reviewed the offer. Cash, 30-day close, minor inspection items only, and he signed his name where she tapped her pen. Saturday, he boxed books, labeled cords with blue tape, and took wide photos of each room again for the property inventory update, because a man who likes records likes to see before and after without argument. Sunday after church, the witness couple stopped by with a foil-covered casserole and hugged him quick at the door, and the pastor said, "We signed what we saw and will say what we saw if asked." And Oren thanked them and felt again the clean weight of community, the kind that shows up with pens and food when facts are heavy. On Monday, Miss Tran emailed a draft of the property exchange protocol. 2 hours, neutral site, third party present, each side with a list. And Oren approved it, then sent his list in tidy columns, which made Mara's attorney reply with an oddly warm, "Thank you for the clarity." And he smiled at the screen without humor, because clarity should not be rare. Midweek, the inspection revealed 3 small items: HVAC filter past due, a GFCI outlet that tripped too easily, a cracked roof tile by the vent. And Rosa sent a handyman who fixed them in an afternoon, while Oren stood by with a cold bottle of water and a clipboard to write "fixed" next to each line. The condo's grab bar went in the same day. At night, he began moving boxes of documents and the fireproof safe to the new place, one trunk load at a time, locking each door behind him, and texting his neighbor the time so someone knew his comings and goings. He made a tiny camp in the condo's kitchen with a mug, a plate, and a kettle, set the binder on the new table like a center stone, and slept on a borrowed air mattress, waking once to the soft hum of the building and thinking how honest a shared wall can be when it is just a wall and not a secret. Closing day arrived clear and dry, and Oren sat in a title office under bright lights, while a clerk slid papers across a wooden table. He signed in his calm hand where she pointed, and when she set the disbursement sheet in front of him, he checked the lines like a dealer checks a tray. Sale price, fees, Diaz's reimbursement to him at the top as ordered, remaining proceeds to be divided by percentage. The clerk asked if he had questions. He said, "No, thank you," and pocketed the check he had earned by looking straight at things. He took Rosa's hand and said, "You were steady." And she said, "So were you." And they both meant it. He drove to his bank, deposited the check, kept the receipt, slid it into bank actions, then went back to the house for the final walkthrough, alone. He moved room to room, touching door frames with 2 fingers like he was closing folders. Bedroom, bath, hall, kitchen, dining, living. In the bedroom, he paused at the blank space where the tall mirror had stood and felt no tape pull in his chest, only a sense that the wall was honest again. In the kitchen, he wiped the counter with one last slow circle, not because it needed it, but because endings deserve neatness. At the door, he looked once at the brass turtle and left it for the buyers because it belonged to the house more than to him now. He locked the deadbolt, tested the handle, and handed the keys to Rosa with a nod. The property exchange with Mara took place 2 days later in a church hall. The pastor lent them because the church knows how to keep rooms calm. Folding tables, 2 chairs each side, Miss Tran's paralegal at the end with a laptop, Diaz present to receive the last bank statements. Mara arrived with her attorney and a face that tried to look composed and not wounded. Oren said, "Good afternoon," as if this were any other appointment. They each slid their lists across, opened the boxes they had brought, and checked items off with small strokes. Orrin took his father's pocket watch back and a box of old photos of Modesto. He gave Mara the holiday dishes she had marked and the sewing machine she preferred. And when she asked for the framed lake menu he had boxed, he said, "Of course," and lifted it out and set it on her side without comment. There were almost no words beyond yes and "there you go" and "sign here." And after 2 hours, the paralegal printed 2 copies of a short memo that said each side had received items to their satisfaction and signed as a witness. On her way out, Mara stopped and said softly and without a script, "I'm sorry for how I did this." And Orrin looked at her and spoke the simplest true thing he owned. "We are finished with how. We will keep the schedule." And then he thanked the pastor for the room and left with his boxes. The final hearing came 4 weeks after closing, on a Friday that smelled like hot concrete. Orrin wore the navy jacket because a courtroom is a room where jackets help people sit up straight. Miss Tran spoke first, short and organized, filed the Diaz report that set the waste number, noted the sale and the clean division, asked the court to enter final orders and terminate temporary support requests due to reimbursement. Mara's lawyer asked for a word about transitions and dignity, and the judge, who had watched their case take shape with steady eyes, said, "This court enters the final decree as submitted, finds the financial waste credible and reimbursed, awards no spousal support at this time, and admonishes both parties to abide by the no-contact terms except for counsel and scheduled exchanges," and then looked at Orrin and said a line he did not expect. "Mr. Hale, your documentation made this efficient." And he said, "Thank you, Your Honor," because it was true, and because gratitude costs nothing and builds a good record. Outside in the hall, Miss Tran shook his hand and said, "Case closed." And he answered, "Understood," the word that had followed him from a doorway into law, and they both smiled at the symmetry. He drove home to the condo with the decree in a big envelope on the passenger seat and the binder on the floor, climbed the stairs, set both on the new table, and poured himself water. He wrote "final" in neat letters on the binder's spine, then opened it to the last page and drafted a 1-page summary titled "Closing Report." Timeline, evidence, orders, disbursements, status. Ended with the sentence, "No further action required absent breach." Signed and dated it, and slid it under the elastic strap. He placed the binder in the fireproof box and shut the lid with a click that sounded like a card shoe closing. That evening, he walked to a community center 2 blocks away and signed up for a Tuesday-Thursday line dance class because the doctor said to move, and because steps done in time with other people felt like a small good joke after months of grim counting. On the way back, he bought peaches from a fruit stand and stood on his balcony in the blue hour, the city's hum, a soft line under the quiet, and ate one over the sink the way his mother had taught him so the juice would not mark the floor. His phone buzzed once with a message from his niece, "Dinner Sunday?" And he replied, "Yes, bring cards, because a man can love a game even after he has had to play one for his life." When the stars finally pushed through the dusty sky, he looked at his hands in the dim light and saw they were steady. Not because the world had made itself gentle, but because he had turned a loud hurt into a clear record and then set it down. He washed the plate, set it to dry, turned off the kitchen light, and stood for a moment in the honest dark. A detective knows when a case is closed. When the file is thick, the orders are signed, and the house is quiet. And Orrin, an old dealer with a notebook and a plan, knew it and slept.